very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
Good evening, I'm Polly Middlehurst in the GB newsroom. And the top story this hour, the British man who held 4 people hostage at a Texas synagogue was originally from Blackburn in Greater Manchester, according to police. 44-year-old Malik Faisal Akram was shot dead after a 10-hour standoff with police. No one else was injured. The gunman had reportedly been demanding the release of a Pakistani neuroscientist in Afghanistan. President Joe Biden has declared the incident an act of terror.
This was an act of terror. This was an act of terror to make sure we got the word out to synagogues and places of worship that we're not going to tolerate this, that we have this capacity to deal with assaults on particularly the anti-Semitism that has grown up.
Joe Biden. Novak Djokovic's home country is set to welcome him by illuminating a skyscraper in Belgrade reading, "You are the pride of Serbia." The tennis star's hopes of defending his Australian Open title have been dashed after a federal court in Australia denied his visa and deported him from the country. He says he's extremely disappointed. Here, the Prime Minister is reportedly planning a reshuffle of his cabinet as he fights back over the Downing Street party allegations. It comes as a growing number of Conservative MPs call for him to resign. The Sunday Times newspaper reported Boris Johnson's also planning a policy announcement blitz, including possibly easing COVID restrictions in England ahead of Sue Gray's report. But the Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer, says he has degraded the office of Prime Minister and must go.
I think he broke the law. I think he's as good as admitted that he broke the law. And after all, Downing Street has now apologised to the Queen for some of the parties that have gone on. And I know that the government's holding position is let's all wait for the Sue Gray report. But I think it's pretty obvious what's happened. There's industrial-scale partying that's been going on at Downing Street. Not much of it is really denied.
Sir Keir Starmer. 2 people have drowned in Peru after tsunami waves hit the country and several other areas of the South Pacific. It follows the eruption of an underwater volcano near the Pacific island of Tonga. The damage caused to Tonga is yet unclear, as huge ash clouds block aerial views of surveillance flights. The country remains largely uncontactable as telephone and internet links are down. Prince Harry is fighting a Home Office decision refusing to allow him to pay for his family's security whilst he visits the UK. Harry wants his 2 children to come from the United States, but claims it's too dangerous without police protection, adding that US security doesn't have sufficient jurisdiction to keep them safe. The Home Office has refused to comment. 16 and 17-year-olds in England will be able to get a COVID booster jab from tomorrow. 40,000 teenagers will initially be eligible for their top-up dose, with that number rising to 600,000 in the coming weeks. On TV, online and on your radio via DAB+, you're watching GB News.
It is Sunday, the 18th of January. You're watching Mark Dolan tonight. A very special Sunday evening we've got lined up for you. My Mark Meets guest is the mother of Martin Hett, who was killed tragically in the Manchester Arena bombing. We're going to talk about grief, how you move on from a tragedy like that, and why she took a degree so that she could fight for a change in the law to protect potential victims. Hear her tough but inspiring story at 10. It's been another week to forget for dear old Prince Andrew. So our big question tonight, can the royal family survive the Prince Andrew scandal? We'll speak to a former government minister critical of the monarchy and a top royal expert who backs the House of Windsor. My big opinion is on its way. I'll be dealing with Prince Harry and the King of Tennis, Novak Djokovic. Don't forget, after 11, it's another instalment of Headliners in which two top comedians join me to look at tomorrow's newspaper front pages. And tonight, it's going to be Andrew Doyle and Sajila Kershi. But between now and then, tackling the big issues of the day, I'm delighted to welcome my all-star panel. So we have political commentator Jo Phillips. A warm welcome to Jo for her first appearance on the show, a very old and dear friend of mine. Best-selling author and Sun columnist Tony Parsons. And political commentator at Young Voices, Connor Tomlinson. Now, you know the best bit of my programme is when you get in touch. So drop me a line between now and 11. My email address is mark@gbnews.uk, and I'll get your opinions on the national television airwaves. So a big 3 hours to come. Remember, we don't do boring, not on my watch. So fire up the kettle, tear open the dark chocolate digestives, or milk, or plain. You decide. Let's get to work. Right Royal Numpty, the Ginger Windsor himself, Prince Harry, is demanding royal security protection when he comes to the UK. He has launched a legal action against the UK government to have the same police protection that he enjoyed before renouncing his royal duties. Now, to be fair, Harry has offered to foot the bill himself, but it's clear to me that he's seeking the privilege of royalty without actually fulfilling any of the duties. Royal protection, but no royal responsibility. Sounds like having your royal cake and eating it. I don't know why he's worried. He travels everywhere with that terrifying wife of his, Yoko Ono, Meghan Markle. This is a royal couple that hate the royal family and its traditions so much that they've clung on to their royal titles, the Duke and Duchess of Sussex. I'm so confused. Whether it's eco-double standards lecturing us about global warming whilst jetting around the world and living in a mansion with 16 bathrooms, that's what I call a royal flush, or attempting to destroy a national institution whose privileges they won't quite relinquish, hypocrisy is the recurring theme with these two. Why have they clung on to their Sussex titles? Why is he still Prince Harry? Well, because these venerated titles are what bring in the money. The fact that they're still Duke and Duchess are what get these multi-million-dollar deals with Spotify, Netflix, and multinational banking organisations across the line. Nice work if you can get it. So you can't have it both ways. You can't reject the values and traditions of our royal family whilst at the same time making colossal amounts of money off the back of it. I've got no problem with this couple leaving the country and getting on with their lives. Good luck to them. I can't imagine anything worse, personally, than life in the gilded cage of royalty. But if you're going to go, go. Give up the titles, give up the privileges, and give up the endless complaining. If you're leaving, do it properly. Megxit means Megxit. We've got to have a proper Megxit, a full-fat Megxit, not Megxit in name only. In my view, this couple lost public support after the nonsense they peddled in their disloyal Oprah interview. The Archbishop of Canterbury, for example, debunked the idea that they married 3 days before their actual wedding. And with that, their testimony to the Queen of US chat collapsed like a house of cards. What a soap opera that was. Harry used to be the most liked member of the royal family, second only to the Queen. Meghan Markle was welcomed with open arms, with an incredible and expensive wedding watched by billions, and with the UK press salivating at the prospect of a new star to fill their column inches. Lovely though she is, given Kate Middleton's rather anodyne nature, the press imagined they'd found the new Diana not in Kate, but in Meghan. It was all to play for, but the couple chose a different path. They courted the fame and, of course, press coverage when it suited them, particularly Meghan, who was previously only known for starring in a TV show called Suits. No, me neither. Well, it suits you, sir, slagging off the royal family and, by association, this country, and yet asking us to provide royal police protection. Of course, I want the couple to be ultra safe, and they should have the fullest protection. But like any non-royal celebrity, it's their responsibility, not ours. I actually don't blame Meghan in all of this, because Harry is the one that has allowed this to happen. Harry has seen his own family diminished and denigrated in podcasts, books and TV shows. Harry has shifted his family lock, stock and barrel across the pond. Harry was the one who has publicly criticised his own father's shortcomings when he was growing up. And it was Harry who ran a coach and horses through his relationship with his own brother William. The world's most famous strawberry blonde is now facing the consequences of his actions. This ginger is seeing red, and it's not a good look for the Queen's grandson to be dragging the British government through the courts. But this is nothing new from this highly litigious couple. They love a court case. The only positive for Harry right now is the existence of Prince Andrew, a member of the Windsor family even less popular than him, although Harry is giving him a run for his money. Novak Djokovic has been thrown out of Australia for refusing to reveal his medical status. Novak's Djokovic, as he has come to be known, is now for some people a twofold hero. Firstly, of course, on the tennis court as one of the most decorated stars in the history of the game. But now, latterly, in a brave battle he didn't have to fight, he's a global standard bearer for bodily autonomy. As we discovered last night, large parts of Australia have effectively become a police state. And down under and across the world, those who have chosen not to be jabbed are treated at best as second-class citizens and at worst as inferior human beings, worthy of scorn and indeed punishment, denied basic public services and even fired from their job. That pint-sized dictator, French President Emmanuel Macron, actually said unvaccinated French people aren't citizens at all. Wow. If left unchecked, history will tell you that dividing up members of society and treating them differently for any reason at all can go to a very dark place. The Australian Open, of course, will be poorer for Djokovic's absence, and it will be an empty victory for whichever vaccinated star wins the trophy. Such is the current state of men's tennis. If you haven't beaten Djokovic, you haven't won at all. So Novak's brought a lot of opprobrium on himself, and he didn't have to do this. He will lose prize money and sponsorship and won't be able to achieve a record-breaking run of wins at the Australian Open. It will ultimately have implications for his career tally when he retires, which is why, even if you don't agree with him, you can't help but say his actions are admirable. He has willingly and enthusiastically relinquished trophies as a matter of principle. For this tennis star, it's been a Henman Hill to die on, and I think the behaviour of the authorities down under has been a grand sham. How ironic that Australia should be the home of a kangaroo court. Australia, a country I love and admire deeply, are obsessed with their zero COVID policy. The country has been closed on and off for almost 2 years. Cases are through the roof, and the disease that they thought they could avoid at eye-watering human and economic cost is now on their doorstep. Here's the score. COVID 40, Australian government love. The lesson learnt here is that the vaccine, whilst fantastic at preventing severe illness and death, and if you risk serious illness from COVID, you'd be mad not to have it. But, it's got to be a matter of personal choice. The idea that Novak Djokovic, one of the fittest and most accomplished athletes on the planet, is a threat to public health in Australia would make a storyline from Neighbours or Home and Away look far-fetched. I say this courageous tennis ace has served us well. He's smashed it, and he's won the argument, game, set and match. Reacting to the big stories of the day is my amazing panel tonight. Political commentator Joe Phillips, legendary broadcaster and journalist, of course, columnist at The Sun newspaper, and best-selling published author Tony Parsons, and a welcome return to political commentator and broadcaster at Young Voices, Connor Tomlinson. All three of you are very welcome to the show. Connor, if I could start with you, can I ask you your thoughts on Novak Djokovic's absence from the Australian Open?
Well, it's tragic that this is one court that Novak couldn't win on. I do find it completely abhorrent that people are saying, oh, well, he violated the rules, so, he's just got to suffer the punishment. I mean, first of all, he was hoisted by his own petard a little bit for lying on the immigration form, but it was getting him a technicality. The point is, the Australians had already decided that they wanted to make an example of him for not being vaccinated and still being a high-profile tennis player, and so they did everything they could to oust him. I don't think the people that turn around and saying, well, he got what he deserves, are understanding it doesn't matter about whether or not it is the law, it matters if the law is legitimate. And is it fair to persecute someone based on your vaccination status when Australia has 92% of their above age of 12 vaccinated, they've had a zero COVID policy isolating themselves from the rest of the world, and suddenly have record cases? No, it's clear their policy isn't working, and so they should have let the man play.
Yes, I mean, Joe Phillips, I would argue this goes beyond a battle with the Australian authorities. This is about bodily autonomy, which is now a global fight.
Yeah, I think the Australian government didn't cover itself in glory particularly. And the one good thing about Novak Djokovic's brief spell in detention is that it drew public attention to the plight of refugees who've been held in the equally bad hotel that Djokovic was complaining about for 9 years. I mean, I think, he made a choice. He made a choice and has never said, oh, I haven't been vaccinated, but we can assume he hasn't. He then said, I'm exempt, but failed to give any actual reasons for the medical exemption. Lied on the form, as Connor just alluded to. And then, photographs appeared of him having tested for COVID, being in Spain and meeting up with other people. So either you can stand up and say, I am not going to take part in the Open and do all the things that you've just said, Mark, about giving up the trophy and all the rest of it, because I will not abide by your rules. But you can't have it both ways and then try and wriggle in and say, well, I am sort of exempt, I'm not exempt. Oh dear, it was somebody else's fault for pulling. I mean, I don't think he's covered himself with glory. I think it's a loss to the tennis. But, as Rafael Nadal said yesterday, actually the match, the tournament, is bigger than one man.
Tony Parsons, you're now a best-selling fiction author. Is Novak Djokovic a hero or a villain?
I think he's an idiot. I think, get jabbed or stay home. I don't think in a free society we can make people get vaccinated. I don't think it works. I don't think it's possible. But at the same time, if I'm going to start travelling again, I'm going to expect anywhere that I go in the world to want me to prove that I've been jabbed, double jabbed, triple jabbed, whatever it takes. I'm going to expect that on the form that I present in Narita Airport in Japan or in Mallorca or wherever it may be in JFK, they're going to want me to be jabbed. And I think that Novak has fallen into the trap that both the Duke of York and our Prime Minister have dropped into, thinking that there's one set of rules for the peasants and there's another set of rules for the rich and famous. And I would love to have seen him win that appeal. I would love to have seen him win that appeal because I would love to have seen the reaction of the Aussie public when he came out on court. Because they're never shy about sledging and revealing their true emotions. And I tell you, the really big shame about it is that the European country where vaccination really took off was Serbia, because like us, they were not hamstrung by EU regulations, and they were not hamstrung by waiting around for Ursula von der Leyen to give them their jab. And so the vaccination rollout in Serbia was very, very big. And now, because he's really the only Serbian superstar, they're going to become an anti-vax nation. I think it's sad. So I would love to have seen him play. Absolutely love to have seen the Aussies give voice to their feelings, because when so many people have sacrificed so much in Australia, around the world. I agree that zero COVID doesn't work. There's no end game. The Chinese are going to find out. There's no way out. New Zealand are going to find out. But so many people have sacrificed so much over the last couple of years that you can't act as though, those rules apply to you, but they don't apply to me. They don't apply to me because I'm a big tennis star. They don't apply to me because I work in 10 Downing Street.
Sorry, do you think the rules are justified? This is a really important question. Do you think they are justified for excluding people based on vaccine status, yes or no?
Yes, it's entirely up to a country to make those.
Okay, no. Yes, I understand it's
then
legally all right for a country. Do you think it's morally all right? That is the point that no one's addressed that I said. You think it's morally all right? You two might want to get off the sofa then, because if you don't want to associate with me, then you're going to be in for a very long night.
I'm happy to associate.
Well, so then clearly it's an individual choice based on vaccination to determine whether or not you're fit and healthy enough, because it doesn't stop transmission. Novak Djokovic, OK, he may have some kooky views on other vaccinations, but for this one, he determined he wasn't at risk.
But kind of like when he tested positive in Belgrade, and then he was out hanging out.
Yeah, I said I disagree with that.
It's not right, is it?
But it's about the whole point of this was originally about whether or not it was about the vaccination, because we all agree. OK, you lie on your immigration form, you get the boot, totally fine. But the original point was the Australian government wanted to make an example of him because he denied that he did not want to have the vaccination. Do you think that's right?
Well, yes, because they've set the rules, and as Tony just said, if you don't want to play by the rules, then don't go.
I mean, I think the Aussies cocked it up. The Aussies cocked it up by giving him a visa. I mean, clearly, I don't actually think they wanted him to come down, and then they wanted this. Although,
well, Tony, they've been making it up as they go along. It's been a kangaroo court in Australia. How ironic.
Yeah, but it's, I mean, everybody's been making it up as they go along because we're in unprecedented times. No one's lived through this before. So, I think, the people I feel sorry for are the Serbs, because now they've got their national hero, their big one global superstar, is this, fanatical anti-vaccine guy. And I just think it's
But Joe, you are a former political spin doctor, and the Novak Djokovic situation, that's just pure politics. It's not public health at all, is it?
Well, it is politics, and I do think, as I said before, I don't think the Australian government handled it very well. It was clearly a mistake to have given him a visa if he had not got any proof that he was either medically exempt or had had a vaccination. So they let it get to a point where it then boiled over. They then kept him for hours and hours and hours, in some sort of detention before sending him into a hotel. And there've been 2 court hearings. But, that's up to Australia to behave, whether or not we agree with it. If we were going to Australia, as Tony just said, you either take the vaccine.
It's actually Australia's quite a tough country to get into. They check you. Food is a big thing. Bringing food into Sydney is a huge deal, and the dogs are all over you. And I like you, Mark. I love Australia, but I've always found it one of the most difficult countries to get into, to get past their immigration. It's not easy.
Now, Joe Phillips, talking about the rules being the rules, we don't offer royal police protection to non-royals. Do you think that Prince Harry is justified in his legal action against the Home Office?
Well, I don't quite understand what he's after, because he's apparently said he wants to pay for it. So why can't he hire his own security team? Or is it not possible for a private individual, which I presume is the nub of this, to employ police, diplomatic protection, all the rest of it? I mean, I think, as you said in your opening monologue, Mark, I think Prince Harry is confused. I think fewer and fewer people actually care what he says or what he does. I think, whatever you think of the royal family, I think most of us have an enormous amount of respect for the Queen. And in this year, the last 12 months for sure, she's lost her husband. She's seen Andrew be disgraced and had to take that tough decision on him. And she's seen Harry wash the dirty linen in public and behave like a completely spoilt brat and tout himself around on American chat shows. So if he wants security and he's willing to pay for it, I can't quite see why he's going to court to do that.
Well, Connor, Tony, I'll come to you in a second. Connor, the issue we've got is that, love him or hate him, he is the Queen's grandson. He is the son of next king, next in line to the throne, Prince Charles, and his safety is paramount. So perhaps, the Home Office are playing with fire by denying him the elite protection enjoyed by other royals.
Well, he did choose, as you said in your monologue, to discontinue his association with his own family, not least of all because he's a sort of case in point of the old phrase, a woman can draw you further than gunpowder can blow you. Prince Harry's been very much led astray by Meghan's political ambitions, but neither here nor there. I agree with Joe. You should definitely be booking your own private security if you decide to shirk off the duties to serve the state, which he was born into and clearly has decided he doesn't want to do anymore. I don't think you get to enlist the help of the Metropolitan Police just because you've got enough money to throw at it. And I think there's plenty of private security contractors that should be more than capable of keeping him safe in this country.
And what do you think about this, Tony? Am I a little harsh on Prince Harry? Does he deserve better protection when he comes to the UK?
I was just looking at that lovely spring day in Windsor. I remember it well. I just remember the excitement and the love and the happiness of the people, but also the media pack. You know, people were so welcoming. You know, that's the great waste and the great shame is that, you know, that, I mean, I'd be really, really happy if he just stayed in California for the rest of his life. I'd really, really be happy if we never see them give another interview with, you know, James Corden or Oprah Winfrey or one of their, you know, superstar sycophants. I think the greatest danger they face if they come back to this country is that someone may boo. You know, I think that's the real thing that I worry about is that, you know, when the Queen slips this mortal coil, that they'll be there because it's, you know, great for the brand and people don't like it. People don't forgive. People don't forget that they smeared and slandered the royal family in a year when the Queen was dealing with, you know, multiple family tragedies and upsets and disruption. And it's really unspeakable the way they've behaved. And I wish they'd just, you know, crawl off to Oprah and James Corden and never darken our white cliffs again.
Do you think
the
worst thing that could happen is that they could be ignored? Meghan would hate that.
Yeah, I mean, you know, nobody had, you know, but she was really, people adored her, but nobody had heard of her. You know, nobody had heard of her. Nobody, you know,
everybody welcomed her and thought how lovely. It was a beautiful day. Everybody,
absolutely.
You know, those of us that are old enough to remember Harry behind his mother's coffin, that poor little boy, in the glare of the world's media, you know, you look at him and you think, oh, you know, he's found happiness, isn't this great? She obviously thought she was going to be bigger than the Queen, got the hump.
Yeah, I'm not sure what she thought. I mean, you know, Harry's got 2 mediocre A-levels from a school where my dog could get 4 good A-levels. They're pretty thick. I just think they're pretty thick, and I think their stupidity is quite dangerous. But I think the royal family will survive a few more Oprah Winfrey and James Corden interviews. I just wish that they would stay home, stay in California.
And shut up.
Well, look, lots more opinion to come from my fantastic panel of Joe, Tony and Connor. Could we be seeing the end of the BBC licence fee? Nadine Dorries seems to think so. My panel and I will be debating this in the news agenda at 9:45. Are you happy to kiss goodbye to the licence fee, or is it money well spent? And after a US judge dismissed Prince Andrew's motion to chuck out the civil case against him, can the royal family survive the continuing scandal surrounding the Duke of York? I'll be hearing from both sides of the argument in the big question next, but I want to hear your views as well, so get your opinions in, mark@gbnews.uk, and have a vote in our Twitter poll at GBNews. Can the royal family survive the Prince Andrew scandal? I'll see you in 2.
Looking ahead to tomorrow's weather, and the UK is looking like a dry, bright and cold start for many, with a widespread frost. Let's home in on the detail. The southwest of England will start dry and sunny with light winds on Monday, but it'll also be a cold start with frost for many, especially in the east. Low cloud, mist and fog at first in the southeast, but brighter further north and in the west. Monday morning starting cold and frosty across Wales as well. Light winds and plenty of crisp winter sunshine on offer. And the northwest also starting the day dry, but there will be low cloud and hill fog over some of the higher ground, especially around Greater Manchester, at a very chilly start as well. Cloud creeping in over parts of the Pennines in the northeast, while it will be brighter towards the coast. A cold start, very dry and also frosty. Scotland starting Monday morning with cloud in the north and the west, with brighter and colder conditions in the south and east. Dry though for most. Plenty of crisp winter sunshine for Northern Ireland, and light winds too. A cold start for the morning, a widespread ground frost as well. And a dry morning following for all, with the early mist and fog slowly clearing to leave plenty of winter sunshine.
And that's how the weather's shaping up tomorrow morning.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world.
If you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
We'll be discussing the BBC shortly. Emails coming in on that already. Dear Mark, hooray for the BBC. I think this might be slightly tongue-in-cheek from Robert, dare I say it. All of those that support the BBC should be free to pay for it. They shouldn't expect those that don't to subsidise it. Well, we'll discuss that shortly with my panel. On Novak Djokovic, of course, that was the topic of my big opinion monologue, which we're currently crafting into a clip for Twitter at GB News. Go and take a look when it's up. And Lorna says, Dear Mark, had the Aussies just got behind Djokovic and supported him in his plight, vaccinated or not, instead of complaining about him thinking he should get preferential treatment, then perhaps they would have benefited in the long run if he'd succeeded and been allowed to play. It may have encouraged the government to recognise natural immunity with proof of antibodies as well as vaccination. And they may then have been able to move out of the limbo that they're stuck in, a missed opportunity. Lorna, thank you so much for that. I do think that many governments that have inflicted lockdowns and vaccine mandates are going to need the world's longest ladder to climb down pretty damn soon. But that's just my view. What do you think? Mark at gbnews.uk. Well, it's time now for the big question, in which we tackle a major story of the day. And today, as a US judge allows a civil case by his rape accuser, Virginia Giuffre, to be heard against Prince Andrew in the States, it's been another week to forget for the Queen's favourite son. I'm not sure, by the way, he enjoys that status anymore. Whilst Andrew strenuously denies all allegations and notwithstanding his legal woes, can the royal family themselves survive the Prince Andrew scandal? I want to hear your views, so drop me an email, mark at gbnews.uk, and please vote in our poll on Twitter at gbnews. Let me know your thoughts. Can the royal family survive this? Well, let's speak now to royal expert and former editor of International Who's Who, Richard Fitzwilliams. Hi, Richard.
Hello.
So
the royal
does Prince
family
Andrew
most certainly can survive this. There is no doubt, in my opinion, that Andrew is a deplorable disgrace. But let's get this in some sort of proportion. The monarchy goes back over 1,000 years continuously, except for the Civil War. Now, if you were in the 1860s, there was a crisis because after Albert's tragic death, Victoria went into seclusion. In 1936, when Edward VIII abdicated, this was a crisis, and it was a very serious crisis, something that nonetheless the monarchy coped with and became exemplars of what you would call us four, the ideal family, and in wartime it was very significant. The 1990s were full of disasters of one sort or another, symbolised by the Windsor Fire, the War of the Waleses, and so forth. And of course, there was Diana's tragic death in the response to something that we had never seen before. So we really must look at the last couple of years, which undoubtedly have been extremely difficult for the royal family, in a certain context. The fact that the Sussexes stepped back only to step down, indeed a very serious misfortune. Andrew is a catastrophe. But so far as the institution is concerned, bear in mind that on the 6th of February, our Queen celebrates 70 years on the throne. So this is her platinum jubilee. Queen Victoria had a diamond jubilee. No other monarch has reigned so long. But also the dedication to duty. The fact that symbolically she, above party politics, someone who is the world's best-known head of state and the only link now, head of state with the Second World War, and someone who's renowned for her sagacity and her experience. This is something to celebrate, and it's well worth remembering on issues such as climate change, for example. If you look at Prince Charles, he will succeed her, and subsequently it will be William and then George. There is a line of succession, and in my opinion, there is no doubt whatsoever that the monarchy, changing as it does with every reign, and also each individual brings a new style to it, but we know what its constitutional role is: the monarch to be advised, encouraged, and warned. Well, the Christmas message is their own. But nonetheless, it is not the power the monarch has, but the power that he or she denies to others that is such an important part of our Constitution.
Well, yes. Now, Richard, you're a man of excellent vocabulary, and I'll look up sagacity later in the show. But I want to ask you whether this brand of Prince Andrew is going to actually affect and toxify the Windsors forevermore, because unlike a prime minister or a government minister, he can't resign from being the Queen's youngest son. He can't really relinquish being Prince Andrew. So there's no obvious bloodletting. I mean, it's possible that he'll settle out of court. He may fight the case and win. Of course, he denies the allegations. But either way, he's still going to be there, ultimately driving around Balmoral in a Range Rover at taxpayers' expense, riding horses and seeing out a luxurious retirement. And that's going to be a problem for the royals, isn't it?
Well, firstly, not at taxpayers' expense. In fact, I'd emphasise that apart from the sovereign grant, 80p per person, and it's
Richard,
been increased.
It's all paid for by us. Those Range Rovers, the petrol, the posh houses, the Wellington boots, the horses, we own that.
Well, the sovereign grant gives money for the Queen and the Queen's staff. So far as the royals such as Andrew, I mentioned that the Queen gives him reportedly about $250,000 a year or so, it's said, and he's got his naval pay. But regarding his future, yes, I do. He absolutely hasn't got a future as a member of the royal family, carrying out any engagements at all in any sense, so far as what will happen in the court, the civil case. Well, I mean, there you've got three options. They could ignore it, which is not, and there would be a default judgment almost certainly against him. He could seek a settlement, and 95% of civil cases in the United States tend to be settled in this way. Now, this would involve undoubtedly a lot of money, but it also might involve that he strongly denies all the charges against him. A way of wording or form of wording in an apology or some such that he wouldn't be prepared to do. So if he actually does fight it, it will be extremely embarrassing, and there's no doubt you could get all sorts of other information that may be embarrassing coming up. But remember your question, it was that the monarchy would survive. People respect what the Queen has achieved. They also respect, for example, look at Prince Charles. Look at the Prince's Trust. That has helped. over 1 million young disadvantaged people. Just as, for example,
Absolutely. But Richard, the allegation of a sexual attack on a young woman it's the most appalling and shocking allegation, which the Prince denies, and I think that's terribly bad news for the House of Windsor, and I think it could potentially bring them down. Let's bring my panel in, Richard. I have an esteemed panel who will contribute to this, if you'll forgive me. Let's bring in Joe Phillips, Tony Parsons and Connor Tomlinson. Connor, what do you think? Do you agree with Richard that the royal family, though damaged by this story, won't be destroyed?
I don't think the royal family will be destroyed by the story, but I disagree with Richard in saying that the legacy is being left in good hands. He seems to cite Prince Charles's action on climate change, but he's very hawkish on government interference on climate change, and I fear he won't show the same restraint interfering in Parliament as the Queen has during her long and respected years of service. He's also saying about the Prince's trust. Prince Charles has recently been funding grants for YouTubers based in the bread tube sphere, which is named after a communist writer who wrote a book called The Conquest of Bread, pushing against vaccine hesitancy and for socialist causes. So I don't think Prince Charles's political leanings are going to be separated from his duties as a monarch. And I don't think...
Can I just interfere to assure you that he couldn't possibly be an activist king? It's just simply not in our constitution. He knows this, and any politics... Anything he may feel about China, for example, where he did show a certain bias on occasions in the past, he knows very well once he's monarch, he has to be above party politics. He can give the Christmas speech, give a Christmas message, but he couldn't possibly involve himself. The example you've given, I'm unaware of, but I mean, so far as his role is concerned, he has a weekly audience with the Prime Minister. He reads the government's speech when he opens Parliament. He couldn't possibly take on some form of activist role in any sense at all.
Richard, Jake, back to me, please. Seriously, Richard, I mean, are we living in a fool's paradise here? He is going to be the cranky king. He's going to be the most micromanaging king we've seen since Henry VIII. This man is a political activist, and it won't stop when he gets the crown.
He'd like to be, very possibly, but he can't be. That's my point.
He'll be moaning about the architecture. He'll be banging on about army supplies, the green agenda, you name it, he'll have an opinion.
Well, so far as architecture is concerned, by the way, he has left it alone, or almost entirely alone, for the last 30 years. But I think he did some service then, and I think people backed him. When he called, for example, we have him to thank Trafalgar Square, St Paul's and Paternoster Square, and of course there was the Chelsea Hospital business. I think that most people thought that he made a conscientious intervention because of the problems of the planning system, and also because a lot of people disliked the way modern architecture, as they saw it, was blighting parts of Britain and parts of London. But he, as a monarch, you know, if you see King Charles III, it's a wonderful play, but it's far from reality as I see it.
Well, there you go. Now, Tony, in your brilliant Sun column, you often write about the royals. Do you think that this is an isolated case for Prince Andrew, that he's damaged goods, he's a write-off, basically, but the family will sort of move forward? What is the collateral damage of the Andrew story?
Well, I think he, as in any family, having someone like that among your kin is not a good look, and I think he's played it wrong absolutely every step of the way. He's expressed, as far as I know, no sympathy for the victims of Jeffrey Epstein, which would have cost him nothing, which would have been the basic, decent human thing to do. I mean, rather like Harry, he was really loved. I mean, you know, he's the prince formerly known as Randy Andy. I mean, he was a huge hero and was very brave during the Falklands War as a helicopter pilot. And, you know, that's, you know, and he could have had a good life, he could have had a decent life, he could have had a very easy, privileged life, and he's thrown all that away. I mean, I have to say that cutting him loose is the only option. No 95-year-old mother should have that on a plate, but the Queen did it. Although I have to say that the one title that he hasn't lost is the Duke of York, which is the one title that everybody knew that he had. So I think that they survive it. I'm concerned that when the Queen finally goes, we lose a really profound connection to our own national history. She was so young when she came to the throne. And
25. Oh, I think you're absolutely right there. But just to make a point regarding the title of the Duke of York, to take away a dukedom requires an act of Parliament. The only precedent is a 1917 Titles Deprivation Act, which actually removed several German peers during the First World War from the House of Lords. So as it could happen, it does appear to me unlikely. Equally, I don't think that it will tarnish the royal brand, because I think if it is humanly possible, he might be able to manage the royal estates, but he's got no future at all. And as you say, the lack of compassion for Epstein's victims was dreadful. He did, after the Newsnight interview, which was it was a car crash of Krakatoan proportions. After that, when it was pointed out to him that he hadn't said anything sympathetic, then he did. But I mean, I think that the court of public opinion was absolutely disgusted, and no wonder.
Absolutely. Joe Phillips, my concern for the royal family, because I think the Queen is a remarkable individual, and I think that the monarchy generally is a classic British idea, which is bonkers on paper, but it kind of works, which is why I continue to support it. I can't bear the idea of some kind of clapped-out ex-politician being our president. So long live the Queen or King. But anybody that wanted to abolish the monarchy, Joe, would just need to put posters up of Prince Andrew. And Tony mentioned that he's got to essentially be defenestrated. He's got to sort of disappear. But he can't disappear because he'll always be the Queen's son.
Well, yes, but he can disappear to a large extent from public life.
How?
Well, I mean, apart from every clip that you've just shown is old. All the pictures we see are old. Every now and again, there's a telephoto lens shot of him driving, in a Range Rover or something around one of the estates. But, Andrew has been his own undoing. As Tony just said, he showed no empathy. The car crash interview on Newsnight was absolutely catastrophic. But isn't it funny? We've talked about Novak Djokovic, we're talking about Prince Andrew, we're probably going to be talking about Boris Johnson. And the thread running through all of this is this utter arrogance of people who think the laws and the rules of good behaviour, whether they're legislative or good manners or common sense, just don't apply to them. And I think what the Queen's done to Prince Andrew shows a ruthlessness. And by all accounts, she was supported by her other children, Anne, Charles and Edward, in doing that. It must have been absolutely heartbreaking for her to do it. But she has shown more ruthlessness to save the monarchy and to preserve it as an institution than the Tory party's got the gumption to do over Boris Johnson.
A couple of seconds to go. Richard, final thoughts?
Well, I think that if you're looking for the future of the monarchy, we haven't mentioned William, and it's just from the Earthshot Prize to, if you want, and this is very, very useful for the monarchy for Britain, if you want the best possible use of soft power, and I was thinking, for example, whether it was the Queen's state visit to Ireland in 2011, or whether it was William going to Israel and the occupied Palestinian territories, or indeed goodwill post-Brexit visits, the monarchy is absolutely extraordinary, and I think it works, and I think William has done with Catherine, I think that they have balanced activities, because we've been talking about the future, and after Charles and Camilla come William and Catherine, and what I see with the Cambridges, I think they're handling the charitable work so well. They're taking on fewer, for example, the Duke of Edinburgh and the Queen, but they're doing more for those charities. The passion side of it is so well handled too.
Yes.
And also there's the formal and the informal. Because remember, when we want the monarchy to appeal to a younger generation, that's absolutely pivotal. But equally, as I see it, it will go forward to George, Charlotte and Louis's generation. There will be problems. There always have been in the past. And the Sussexes are absolutely unpredictable.
Absolutely. Richard, I read earlier that you've done 1,000 television interviews. So thank you for making it 1,001. We found out why you're so in demand. We look forward to catching up again soon. Royal commentator Richard Fitzwilliams, and thanks to my panel who return in 2 minutes' time. I want to hear your views. Mark at gbnews.uk. Can the royal family survive the Andrew crisis? Well, on Twitter, the verdict is now in. 81% say the royal family will prevail. So thanks very much for voting in that one. Now, as we continue to face a cost of living crisis, is a freeze on the BBC licence fee a step in the right direction? Would you like to see the back of it? Well, I'll take your views and we'll hear my panel's opinions after this. And at 10 o'clock, I'm going to meet Figan Murray, a very courageous woman. She lost her son in the Manchester Arena bombings. She wants a change in the law to protect future victims. Her story is a moving but inspiring one. You won't want to miss it. Lots to get through. Don't forget, headliners at 11 as well. 2 top comedians and tomorrow's front pages. So a busy couple of hours. I'll see you in 2.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world.
If you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
Welcome back to Mark Dolan tonight. Let's have a look at some of the big stories from today's papers. My all-star panel feature political commentator Joe Phillips, legendary broadcaster, journalist and best-selling author and Sun columnist Tony Parsons, and political commentator, presenter and writer at Young Voices Connor Tomlinson. Now, the Mail on Sunday have suggested that the government will soon freeze the BBC licence fee at £159 for the next 2 years, with the Culture Secretary tweeting later in the day, because of course that's how they communicate these days, that we'll see the end of the licence fee in 2027. That's right, the end of the licence fee in 2027. Now, the self-proclaimed working-class Culture Secretary Nadine Dorries' decision to freeze the fee follows a series of fraught meetings with the Director General Tim Davie, who tried and failed to convince Dorries not to link the corporation's left-leaning mindset to its funding levels. An ally of the Culture Secretary said that the delays over state-run television are now over and that actually it's going to be a thing of the past. So Dorries is expected to confirm the move soon and announce that the current funding model will be replaced. But the question to my panel is, will we miss it? What do you think, Joe Phillips?
I think this is appalling behaviour by Nadine Dorries. You shouldn't be making government announcements by tweet, by Twitter. This should be announced to the House of Commons properly. Unfortunately, although there are very good reasons to have a look at the funding model of the BBC, particularly in the face of the huge opposition and competition from Netflix and other streaming services, you have to stop and think what the BBC actually does. And this reeks, unfortunately, of Nadine Dorries, who is not the brightest woman in the world. She is absolutely so far supporting, sycophantic towards Boris Johnson.
Would you call it like populist politics?
It's populist politics, but it's so stupid because it looks like a Yaboo sucks because some people perceive the BBC to be left-leaning because they dare to criticise the government. Don't forget, this government, the current government, refused to put any ministers on the Today programme and go on any BBC programmes until they were forced into it because we went into a pandemic. and they suddenly realised that they did actually need to talk to people who don't get their news on Twitter. The BBC does a lot of amazing things, not least of all stepping up to the plate with education programmes as soon as we went into lockdown to keep the kids who were being homeschooled and the parents who were trying to do it entertained, amused and educated. You know, there is news, there is sport, there are radio stations, there is the World Service.
Orchestras.
All of that stuff. You can take that away, but we were just talking about soft power. The soft global power of David Attenborough and his programmes would not have been made by anybody other than the BBC. Now, you could argue that another very well-funded organisation might make that thing now, but no other organisation would have gone to the lengths, the investment in the technology, the camera work and stuff to create something. That soft power is more important than ever.
Connor thinks you're the weakest link. Tell me why.
Oh, I'm nearly having an aneurysm listening to this.
Point the celebrity.
Well,
It's
David,
okay, I've got a first aid course.
That's
Listen,
fantastic.
Don't be offended. That's live.
That's all right.
I'm done. I'm out of BBC brands. What do you think?
First of all, David Attenborough, nice voice though he has, he did call human beings basically a cancer on the planet. So I think his reviews are rather reprehensible. So I'd rather he didn't keep giving TV programmes for no matter how much he does for the orangutans. The idea that the BBC is not left-wing is astounding. They take gender pronoun guidance from Stonewall. So
No, they don't.
They actively do.
They've got rid of that campaign.
They finally scrapped it after public pressure.
What about Laura Kuenssberg, who needed police protection going to Labour Party conference? How can it be that the BBC is hated by the left and the right? Surely they're doing something right. They're bang in the middle.
Because you're never left enough for the left, because as we've seen with like J.K. Rowling, for example, they'll always eat their own. When the mob decides that there's a new wind of political correctness and each of them are racing against each other to be the most moral person in the room, then they're going to come up with some wacky idea of who's the president next in power.
That the BBC is left-wing?
So what about June Sarpong's six-figure salary, about having a diversity chief only working 3 days a week, them heading the Trusted News Initiative to shut down people who were questioning, as is on this network, whether or not the vaccine should be paid for by taxpayers or disencouraging any vaccine hesitancy, for example. I mean, and also you stating the Tory government is particularly right-wing. The Green spending...
I didn't say
You did. So, OK, you said the accusations of the BBC are left-wing because they dare to criticise the government. The implication there is that the Conservative government is right-wing. This is the least right-wing, least freedom-based, least free market government.
To infer. That is not what I was implying.
OK, well, that's very much what it sounded like. So if the implication is that the BBC are not left-wing because they choose to criticise the government, I don't particularly see them going against lockdown policy, for example.
It is the job of journalists to question governments.
Yes.
If governments are too frightened to be held to account and refuse to put their ministers on the state broadcaster, then you can only draw one conclusion, that they don't like the criticism. And unfortunately, what Nadine Dorries has announced today, with all the elegance that she can possibly muster on a tweet, is actually something that looks a Yaboo sucks, not something that is government policy that has been thought through.
I mean, Tony, I think we have to be careful what we wish for here. I agree with Joe that we've got to look at the funding model, have a conversation about that. And I don't think that the licence fee is a long-term solution, especially going after grannies at the tail end of the biggest recession in 300 years, threatening them with court action and possible jail for not paying for Gary Lineker's cufflinks. But be careful what you wish for, because more and more of our TV comes from US giants like Netflix, Disney+, Apple. And so, in the end, we need the beep, don't we?
Well, I think it's... I miss the BBC. I miss the BBC that I grew up with. I miss there being no hint of a political bias, and it's really quite a modern thing. It dates back to the summer of 2016. I think that's when the Great Divide, and clearly over the last few weeks, the last few days, the government's been getting a kick in from the BBC, and I understand that, and in many ways they absolutely deserve every kick in they get. But I was watching the news yesterday, and they were bringing on Keir Starmer, and I thought, just in parenthesis, someone's going... Because some of these accusations are, as far as I can tell, people having a drink at the end of a working day. Some of them are going to fade into the ether and we will have forgotten all about them very shortly. And I thought that, in parenthesis, one of these broadcasters, as they were the raging relish at Boris being brought down, was going to say, Keir Starmer, who's had his own accusations of having a beer at the end of a word. I just thought, in parenthesis, that this would, just in the old BBC tradition of balance, it would be mentioned, and yet it wasn't mentioned because it didn't fit the narrative. I mean, I think.
Well, it was this morning.
Well, that's a really good question. What do you want to do? Get rid of the BBC, bring back the old one? Let me know. Mark at gbnews.uk. Lots more to come.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world.
If you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
Lots more to get through in the second hour of the show with my panellists Joe Phillips, Tony Parsons and Connor Tomlinson. In the news agenda, we'll play another Great British game show based around a major news story of the day. But we're also going to find out whether Operation Red Meat is enough to save Boris Johnson. He's going to unveil some dramatic measures in relation to our borders, national security, COVID, the environment, and much, much more. A populist set of policies are coming, so we'll get reaction from my panel. Can Boris be saved? Can we save the big dog? Also, in my Mark Meets segment next, I'm going to meet a remarkable woman who lost her son in the Manchester Arena bombing, and she is now pursuing a change in the law so that future potential victims will be safer in the event of a terror attack. So lots to get through, plus your emails as well, and don't forget, headliners after 11. But first, here's Polly with the headlines.
Hello, I'm Polly Middlehurst in the GB newsroom. The top story, the British man who held 4 people hostage at a Texas synagogue was originally from Blackburn in Greater Manchester, police have confirmed. 44-year-old Malik Faisal Akram was shot dead after a 10-hour standoff with police. No one else was injured. President Joe Biden has declared the incident an act of terror. Here, the Prime Minister's reportedly planning a reshuffle of his cabinet as he fights back over the Downing Street party allegations. It comes as a growing number of Conservative MPs call for him to resign. The Sunday Times newspaper reports Boris Johnson's also planning a policy announcement blitz, including easing COVID restrictions in England ahead of Sue Gray's report. But the Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer says he has degraded the office of Prime Minister and must go.
I think he broke the law. I think he's as good as admitted that he broke the law. And after all, Downing Street has now apologised to the Queen for some of the parties that have gone on. And I know that the government's holding position is let's all wait for the Sue Gray report. But I think it's pretty obvious what's happened. There's industrial-scale partying that's been going on at Downing Street. Not much of it is really denied.
Sir Keir Starmer, the Labour leader, speaking there. Well, let's turn our attentions to events overseas. And 2 people have been confirmed dead after drowning in Peru, after tsunami waves hit the country and several other South Pacific countries in the area. That follows the eruption of an underwater volcano near the Pacific island of Tonga. That particular country remains largely uncontactable as telephone and internet links have gone down. Initial reports suggested there are no mass casualties, but some reports say there is significant damage to roads and bridges. Prince Harry is fighting a Home Office decision refusing to allow him to pay for his family's security when he visits the UK. Harry wants his 2 children to come from the United States, but claims it's too dangerous without police protection, saying US security doesn't have sufficient jurisdiction to keep them safe. The Home Office has refused to comment. 2 senior Met police officers have been dismissed for gross misconduct and breaching professional standards. Chief Superintendent Paul Martin and Chief Inspector Davinder Dahola were found to have behaved appallingly towards junior staff and cheated expenses between 2017 and 2019. Commander Catherine Roper says the pair abused their trusted positions. 16 and 17-year-olds in England will be able to get a COVID booster jab from tomorrow. 40,000 teenagers will initially be eligible for their top-up dose, and with that number rising to 600,000 in the coming weeks. In sport, Novak Djokovic's home country is set to welcome him home by illuminating a skyscraper in the capital city of Belgrade. The skyscraper will read, "You are the pride of Serbia." The tennis star's hopes of defending his Australian Open title have been dashed, though, after a federal court denied his visa and deported him from the country. He says he's extremely disappointed. On TV, online and DAB+ radio, you're with GB News.
So many emails coming in across a range of subjects, including those raised in my big opinion monologue, which you can now see on Twitter. Go to @GBNews and let me know your opinions. Now, on the BBC, the government are hinting that they're going to scrap the licence fee in 2027. So let's get to some of your views and reactions. How about this from Jenny, who says, "Hi, Mark, scale the BBC monstrosity right back. Get rid of small local radio stations, they're not needed. Keep BBC 1 and 2, have just one kids channel and keep the World Service. Do that and I'll pay £5 a month, i.e. 60 quid a year. Otherwise, get rid of it and keep up the good work." Well, Jenny, thank you so much for your kind words and thanks for your email. How about this from Roger, who says, "Dear Mark, a line from a new BBC dark thriller drama last night." And here's what that bit of dialogue actually said. "Our new gender-neutral toilets are just round the corner on the left. Say no more," says Roger. "Keep up the good work. GB News is the best thing to happen to TV for years." Well, I certainly don't want to get rid of BBC News because I'll be honest with you, I love the competition. Bring it on. How about this on the royal family? We were debating whether the Andrew drama will damage the royal family, possibly ultimately destroy it. Well, Kevin says, "Mark, I live in Ireland, where our president is a contemptible geriatric communist who praised Fidel Castro on his death. I can see the appeal of a royal premier who stays above politics." Lovely to have you watching in Ireland. Lots of viewers in Ireland, both in Northern Ireland and in the Republic, and it's great to have your company. Tell your friends, spread the word, and let's change the world together. Now, a couple of other ones before we crack on with what is going to be a very busy hour. Boris is talking about red meat. That's right. There's going to be some serious policy announcements by way of a reset for his premiership. Will they work? Well, Yvonne in Suffolk says, "Dear Mark, if this government is going to scrap all COVID restrictions, I hope Boris is going to keep kids in school, send people back to the office, tell hospitals, doctors and vets to open their doors to all of us again. Too many companies have been hiding behind COVID and denying the public a good service. I'm telling you this as one of thousands not allowed in the hospital to be with my dying mum this time last year. Unforgivable, Boris and your party-loving colleagues. You've defended rule-breaking in your party for too long. Do the right thing and resign. Strong words from Yvonne there, and my heart goes out to you. My condolences, Yvonne, for the loss of your dear mum. I'm so sorry to hear about that. And then, shall we finish up with the BBC? Elizabeth says, keep the BBC, but as a subscription service like the others. I never watch it as it's become so left-wing and biased. It's disgusting that they've made pensioners pay again. If you do try to cancel, they send intimidating and threatening letters together with turning up on your doorstep to put pressure on you. It is disgraceful. There's no way that our pensioners should be harassed so that Gary Lineker can get a new set of cufflinks. How about this finally from Gillian, who says, Dear Mark, if the BBC is so wonderful, then break it up into manageable separate entities and make it subscription funded. The people will vote with their direct debits. Well, Gillian, never forget that GB News always has been and always will be free. And it's lovely to have your company, so let's crack on with a busy hour to come. Don't forget, after 11, I'll be joined by two top comedians for headliners when we'll have a look at tomorrow's newspaper front pages. But it's time now for Mark Meets, in which I speak to big names in the world of showbiz, sport, politics, business and beyond. And often I speak to simply people that have a big story to tell. Tonight's conversation is going to be a really difficult one. Martin Hett was one of 22 people tragically killed in the devastating Manchester Arena bombing attack. On the 22nd of May 2017, an Islamist extremist detonated a homemade bomb as people were leaving the Manchester Arena following a concert by American singer Ariana Grande. 23 people died, including the attacker, and 1,017 people were injured, some of them children. Since Martin's tragic and appalling death, his mother, Figan Murray, has campaigned for a change in the law. She's calling it Martin's Law. She actually enrolled at university and studied for her master's in Counter-Terrorism, and she's now urging the government to consider legislating Martin's Law, which would see large venues making better provision for potential terror incidents. Well, I'm delighted to say Figan joins me now. Hi, Figan.
Hi.
Thank you so much for joining me on the programme. Can we just talk about Martin first? What kind of guy was he?
Absolutely hilarious. He cracked a joke a minute. He saw the funniest things in the most mundane things and made everybody laugh.
Yeah. So popular. And what were his interests? What was he good at?
He loved pop music, unfortunately, I have to say, which very sadly led to his death because he went to a pop concert. He just loved Coronation Street, which explains the tattoo on his leg. That is a picture of Deirdre Barlow behind bars. Yeah, he just lived for Coronation Street and for pop music.
Isn't that wonderful? So he had a Deirdre Barlow tattoo, and therefore obviously a character, and I guess a bit of an individual, a bit of a one-off.
Yeah, he was certainly one of a kind, definitely.
Well, let's talk about what you're doing in his memory, which is so impressive. You want to see legislation which will force businesses, large venues to actually have a plan for any potential terror attack. And you've actually been to university to educate yourself. So tell me more about your degree.
So the reason I did the degree is because I, very naively until the day Martin died, I made the assumption, probably like a lot of other people, that terrorism doesn't really happen to us as individuals. It happens in London, it happens abroad with school shootings, etc. But it doesn't happen in my world, and that was my belief. And when it did happen and Martin was killed, I just ashamedly had to admit to myself that I knew zero, literally zero, about terrorism. And I felt that terrorism, the ideology, had become my enemy. And the best way to deal with your enemy is to get to know its ways of working, its weaknesses, its strengths. You need to understand your enemy. And that is why I joined the university and did a 2-year master's in counter-terrorism. And I'm happy to say I'm a lot wiser now.
Well, that's fantastic, and big congratulations on that achievement.
Thank you.
What did you learn from that course about counter-terrorism?
Well, it confirmed something I had felt right from the start. Although I knew nothing about terrorism, I kept asking myself questions as to why somebody would do these acts, why somebody would actually kill themselves, take loads of other people with them. I wanted to understand why, and I kept thinking in those early days before I started my training that it must be a social problem. It must be created through and by society, and it has to be dealt with through society. And when I did my training, my whole learning kind of confirmed what I thought.
And how would we go about de-radicalizing people? Because, I mean, not only have you acquired, obviously, a lot of knowledge from doing this counter-terrorism degree, but you've worked in counselling and psychology yourself already, haven't you? So you've got some insight into the human soul.
Yeah, well, that was my job until Martin died. I was a psychotherapist for about 22, 23 years. Unfortunately, I had to step down from that job when Martin died. I just don't feel able to do it anymore.
Yeah, but I would have thought that you're bringing some of that skill set, some of that insight into your understanding of radicalization.
Definitely. And, I've really thought about why people get radicalized, how they get radicalized. And that led me then to working with young people. Despite COVID and despite attending the Arena inquiry 4 days a week, I've managed to, in the last 2-3 years, to reach about 14,000 children, either in person or via Zoom link at schools. This year, the inquiry is about to finish this week, or our attendance is going to be finished at least. And my intention is that hopefully COVID permitting, I want to reach this year, by the end of this year, I want to reach 100,000 children. That is visiting secondary schools, colleges and universities.
So how do we go about preventing people from being radicalized? How do we stop it from happening in the first place, do you think?
I think, to me, the key is education, educating adults, but mainly young people who will in actual fact become the future adults in not that many years. So the better informed people are about the dangers, how radicalizers approach you, what the sort of things they say, how they go about accessing people, who they target, all of that is stuff that I teach young people so that they are aware. And I also teach them about how to access support if either they themselves or a friend of theirs might be in the process of being radicalized. And to me, education is absolute key.
And what sorts of things would you say to them by way of avoiding being radicalized? Because let's be honest, it's probably similar to grooming, isn't it?
It absolutely is. And unfortunately, terrorism recruiters use the same tactics. They start initially just chatting online. They start befriending. They look for weaknesses and chinks in your armor. They target people who are vulnerable, who might have, in particular, young people, bullying issues or problems at home, conflict with parents or peer groups. Anybody who is in the slightest bit vulnerable, they can target. So I think understanding how these people operate can go a long way in looking after yourself and keeping yourself safe. If it doesn't feel right in your gut instinct, it probably isn't right.
prevention is clearly the way forward. Is it possible to de-radicalize someone? Because there are experts that say that's not possible, and we have, haven't we, seen high-profile examples of people that claimed to have recovered and they've embraced peace, and then they go on to attack again?
Sure, there'll always be people who are, in inverted commas, de-radicalized, and then they're not. But I actually, over the course of the last 3 years, have met people who were extremists, and they are now doing exactly the opposite. And that's both in the UK and abroad.
Well, I'm very pleased to hear that. Tell me about the bears.
The bears.
I love these bears. Now, you actually knit these bears. Is that right? Do you make these bears?
Yes, I do. Yes, I do knit them. And initially, that was something I started before Martin died. In fact, I lost my hearing 60% on one of my ears. And because I was a therapist, that was quite upsetting for me. And I felt quite down about it. So I started knitting, because I used to always tell my clients, if you feel depressed, do something creative. It really helps. And I found knitting really, really helped me. So I did it for my own therapeutic purposes initially, wrote a therapeutic storybook as well about 16 bears with mental health issues. That book is called Bears Have Issues Too. And when Martin died, I decided to make the bears my peace bears, because I felt that the world needs tolerance, kindness, forgiveness, peace, love. And the bears symbolize all of that. So I post them all over the world, literally.
That's remarkable. I know that they can be acquired on your website. I'll give the details out very shortly. Tell me about Jordan the bear, a particularly special one.
I wish I could show him, but he's actually just on his way back from Dubai. He has his own Facebook page. Jordan loves traveling. So I took Jordan. He was just a normal bear that I was photographing, and I was going to London to an award ceremony, and I thought I'll photograph him at the table. When we got there, it was such a posh function, I was too embarrassed to bring him out. So I left him in my bag, but on the train back home to Manchester from London, I left him in one of the brown food bags from the train, and with a note saying that he was knitted by me, Martin's mum, and I want to see how far he can travel, and please don't keep him for more than a few days. And that bear has literally been passed from person to person and has travelled the whole world. As I said, he's just coming back from Dubai, and he's been in China, he's been in Bali, he's been to France, to Switzerland, just anywhere. He's been in Africa, he's been all over.
He's a global celebrity. For anyone that's watching this that's going through a difficult time, or perhaps they know someone that is, can you explain why gifting them a bear might actually help, and what's the right way to actually use a bear if it's going to be therapeutic?
Well, I've had, interestingly enough, people with mental health issues, they have approached me and said something like, "Oh, I've had a miscarriage. Can you do me a bear? I need comfort." I've had people saying, "Oh, one of my children is very suicidal. Can you knit him a bear? Because I know if he puts the bear on the kitchen table, he's in a really bad place and I can go and help him." I've had people ask me to make bears with bipolar disorder, because they can relate to them and they draw comfort from it. Lots of people with anxiety want them. In fact, my own dentist has one that is lent to people while they're on the dentist chair. Adults and children make use of that bear.
I think that's absolutely fantastic. And I honestly think that you're doing Martin proud. We've only got a couple of seconds to go. I could speak to you for hours. But Martin's Law, very briefly, I mean, I know the government are looking very seriously at actually legislating this, which will be an amazing legacy. What are the basics of Martin's Law, Figen?
But it's purely to legislate and mandate security at public spaces and places. At the moment, security is only a recommendation, but it's not mandatory. And all I'm trying to do is bring this in as a mandatory legislation so that people, staff and visitors can be safe at venues.
Well, listen, it's remarkable what you've done. Let me tell our viewers all about your work. First of all, the book is out now and it's called Bears Have Issues Too. And your website, where these peace bears can be acquired, and also your story and Martin's, is all at feganmurray.com, and that's spelled F-I-G-E-N, feganmurray.co.uk. Sorry, that's feganmurray.co.uk. Fegan, a privilege to have you on the show. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
There we are. Well, remarkable stuff. A remarkable lady, I think you'll agree. Do take a look at the website. I've been reading about what she's been doing all afternoon, and it's truly humbling. Lots more to come. My panel are waiting in the wings. Connor, Joe and Tony. We'll be talking about Operation Red Meat. Will that be enough to save Boris's skin and win back support? We'll be discussing that. And we'll have another Great British Game Show. How well do you know your MPs? We'll be playing a very fun game later in the programme. You won't want to miss that one. Lots to get through. Don't forget, we've got headliners, big laughs and big opinions with tomorrow's papers after 11. But first, the weather.
Looking ahead to tomorrow's weather, and the UK is looking like a dry, bright and cold start for many, with a widespread frost. Let's home in on the detail. The southwest of England will start dry and sunny with light winds on Monday, but it'll also be a cold start with frost for many, especially in the east. Low cloud, mist and fog at first in the southeast, but brighter further north and in the west. Monday morning starting cold and frosty across Wales as well. Light winds and plenty of crisp winter sunshine on offer. And the northwest also starting the day dry, but there will be low cloud and hill fog over some of the higher ground, especially around Greater Manchester, and a very chilly start as well. Cloud creeping in over parts of the Pennines in the northeast, while it will be brighter towards the coast. A cold start, very dry and also frosty. Scotland starting Monday morning with cloud in the north and the west, with brighter and colder conditions in the south and east. Dry though for most. Plenty of crisp winter sunshine for Northern Ireland, and light winds too. A cold start for the morning, a widespread ground frost as well. And a dry morning following for all, with the early mist and fog slowly clearing to leave plenty of winter sunshine. And that's how the weather's shaping up tomorrow morning.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world.
If you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
So many emails coming in. Remember, the highlight of my show is when you get in touch. It's amazing to have your company. And let me tell you that Ronald was very moved by my interview with Figan Murray, who lost her son in the Manchester Arena bombing. And Ronald says, "Dear Mark, that lady is fantastic. She should be recognised nationally with an honour. Take care, Ron." Well, I'm sure she'll appreciate that message if she's watching. So much praise coming in for her. And yep, she's really making a difference in memory of her dear son. Well, lots more to get through. Still with me, my fantastic panel of Joe Phillips, Tony Parsons and Connor Tomlinson. We've already heard about Operation Save Big Dog, in which Boris Johnson has drawn up a list of fall guys to quit over Partygate so that he can keep his job. Well, today, further manoeuvres by the PM have come to light, and the name predictably did not disappoint. It's something that Boris is really good at doing. This one is Operation Red Meat. According to the Sunday Times, Boris is looking to win back voters and rebel backbenchers with a string of red meat policies, including announcing a number 10 workplace booze ban in an effort to end the drinking culture in Club Downing Street. Freeze the BBC licence fee for 2 years to help the cost of living. We've heard about that and discussed it just a few moments ago. Give the military control of the Channel in the battle to stop illegal immigrants. Unveil new plans to tackle the backlog of operations in the NHS. Unveil extra money for skills and job training for the 1.5 million people who are out of work and on universal credit. And here's a big one. Lift the remaining coronavirus restrictions on January the 26th. And finally, publish Michael Gove's Levelling Up white paper the following week, which aims to improve lives in neglected towns in the north. Now, that can't come too soon, in my view. A senior Westminster figure has said the number of no-confidence letters against the Prime Minister has risen to 35, leaving him dangerously close to the 54 that would trigger a vote. He'll be hoping that this policy announcement can ease the tide. But what do you think about this, Connor? Will it make the difference? Has he thrown you some red meat with those ideas?
Well, it's really annoying that it's called a red meat policy when it amounts to, oh, hey, we uncovered a copy of our 2019 election manifesto in the drawer, and now we're actually going to stick by it finally because you're holding our feet to the fire. It's irony that people keep mentioning the parties as well as a sort of instigating factor to all this, because it reminds me a bit of back in my student days. I was a meticulous planner.
Like 2 years ago?
All right, enough with the insults, thank you very much. Youth and beauty all in one package. But the problem is, a lot of my other fellow students had the inclination of being slightly less conscientious than me, and rather than do their assignments in advance, they decided to do parties a week, and then about 10 minutes before the deadline, they'd rush off to the library, pull out some journal articles they saved 6 weeks ago, and hand it in and get a test.
Tony never does that with his book deadlines, by the way.
Well, that's why they're so eminently readable.
My editor's watching, so...
So this is what it smacks of. It smacks of a last-minute rounding up and trying to appease people, when really, I mean, there's not a bus long enough for all the people Boris wants to throw under it and trying to save his skin. And as I said last time I was on right before Christmas, it's still the matter of, OK, is Boris going to go out with a whimper or a bang? Is this him holding on for quite a while, or is it going to be the 1922 Commission hands in enough letters to force a vote of no confidence and he's out on his backside before the first month of the year's gone?
Yeah, Tony, I think this is tiresome. It's like government by press release, government by opinion poll.
Yeah, you know, when 17.4 million people voted for Brexit, the largest vote for anything in this nation's history, when Boris Johnson and Michael Gove looked the British people in the eye and said, being outside of the EU means we'll be able to slash your energy bills, I believed them. I thought that they were telling the truth, and I find it shameful and shaming that they've just so casually and brazenly broken those promises. And, you know, sacking a few tone-deaf Tory toffs from Downing Street, who gives a monkeys, really, you know? I think the problem that Boris has got, well, he's got a couple of problems, but one of the problems he's not really much of a Conservative Prime Minister. You know, if we wanted big spending, bossy state, green fundamentalism, you know, if we wanted all that socialist crap, we could have voted for Labour. And so there's been a loosening of his bond on his base. You know, on his base, he's been neglecting them. He hasn't had the low taxation, getting us going, getting us rocking. You know, delivering on the promises of Brexit. You know, we've only seen the downside. We've only seen, you know, the fracturing of the United Kingdom. We've only seen our neighbours loathing us, and he hasn't made the most of it. He's putting up corporation tax. He should be making this place a place to do business. So, you know, and I think his biggest problem of all is I don't actually think he wants the job. I don't think he wants it. I think he's knackered. I think he's exhausted. He's an unfit, overweight, 57-year-old man with 2 children under the age of 2. He's gotten a lot on his plate, and I think the only thing that's keeping him there, as soon as he leaves office, he's a fabulously wealthy man. As soon as he leaves office, he can.
You could actually buy shares in Boris Johnson now, couldn't you?
Well, you know, his memoirs are going to be great. You know, he's going to have gigs on the American lecture circuit that will make Tony Blair spit blood. You know, and he'll be able to watch his children grow. It'll be a stress-free life. You know, might even lose a bit of weight.
I don't know. He's still married to Carrie. I don't know about a stress-free life.
But he, you know, but if he leaves now, then he's another Tory footnote. He's another historical mediocrity. He's the shortest-serving Prime Minister since Eden in '57. And so he's there. And I honestly don't see any grand vision for the country. And it's a shame. It's a tragedy. It is a real tragedy because he connected with the working class and he broke that. And you know, I come from a tribal Labour family, and to break that bond, to see a Tory Prime Minister break that, it's not an insignificant thing. It's not. It's a profound shift in our nation's temperament, and to just see it wasted, and that's the depressing thing. The one we should be talking about living with COVID, getting the economy going, getting our schools open and keeping them open. When we should be seeing the cost that this pandemic has had and lockdown has had on the education of people suffering from cancer, people suffering from other diseases. When we should be talking about that, we're talking about these banalities. You know, we're talking about cheese and Sauvignon Blanc. You know,
I mean, yes, it's an affront to the British people. It's an insult. It's a misjudgment. But it's not what really matters, is it?
But it's because he's a banal man. That's the trouble. I mean, he hasn't got any beliefs other than in himself. He has, and that is his now being exposed as his great weakness. He hasn't got a group of people around him who share his beliefs and share his vision. You know, whatever you think about Tony Blair, whatever you think about Margaret Thatcher, they had a vision and an idea, and they surrounded themselves with people who would execute.
New Labour was a project.
Absolutely.
And Thatcherism was a project.
Absolutely.
I mean, Thatcher, what was her catchphrase in high office? Are they one of us? She was endlessly sounding out whether colleagues were on board with the project. What is the Boris project?
Well, the Boris Johnson project is about Boris Johnson. He wanted to be Prime Minister, not for 1 minute, excuse me, thinking that, you know, there was going to be a global pandemic that was going to knock the socks off absolutely everybody. And I think, as Tony says, he doesn't want it. Now, he has got an option, which he won't take because he's too vain, and he is clearly seeking to blame everybody but himself because he's got no concept of responsibility or moral authority. But he could actually go out and be more than a footnote and say, you know, I've really got this wrong. I'm going to see the Queen. I'm going to hand in my resignation. I'm going to stay, you know, as a caretaker Prime Minister until the party's chosen a new leader, and then we go for a general election or whatever. And he could go out with some vestige of dignity. But at the moment, he's a disgrace. He's a disgrace to the Conservative Party of, you know, John Major, Margaret Thatcher, Chris Patten, Damien Green, Ken Clarke, Michael Heseltine, Dominic Grieve, decent people. He's an absolute, utter disgrace.
Sounds like a mixed bag to me if it's got John Major and Dominic Grieve in. But look, I take your point.
No, but they're decent people.
Right, that's true. By the way, that's a fair point. They are people of principle. But I guess the issue with Boris is that his narcissism was priced into his brand when people voted for him in December 2019.
More fool them.
Now the British people and Tory MPs have got to ask themselves the question that Boris's wives, mistresses, editors and friends have had to ask themselves, is he worth the trouble? Is he worth the trouble? Is he worth what he puts us through? Because I can't believe that this has gone on, that the national debate is about parties and Carrie hugging her friend and what was going on.
If it doesn't matter, it will blow over, won't it?
But it won't blow over.
But it does matter. It does matter. It does matter to people, especially people that really suffered over the last couple of years. People that couldn't have their friends and loved ones at a parent's funeral or a child's funeral. I've read a few reports of people who buried their children over the last couple of years, and people that couldn't visit their elderly parents in care homes. Just all the restrictions, you know, there's the endless restrictions. I think everybody's been touched by it. Everybody, you know, just to have a daughter doing A-levels, you suddenly what the effect that had on that. And okay, that's not as bad as watching a loved one die and not being able to hug your mother at your father's funeral. But it's still, you see the human cost in young people suddenly saying, "Well, the life that I thought I was going to have with these exams that are coming up, suddenly that's all in the balance."
Yeah.
And so it's not a trivial thing to ignore it and just
yeah. But you are right. Yvonne in Suffolk emailed the programme earlier and talked about the loss of her dear mum during lockdown, and she's devastated by what she's been through.
My son's a paramedic. You know, he worked his socks off along with everybody else in the National Health Service. There was no chance for parting. He was going to work. He didn't see his wife, his kids, his mum, or anybody else. He just went to work, slept, went to work. And it was
however,
frightening.
you are a Democrat. Now, you've actually advised the Lib Dems back when they were electable. They were quite a political
Blimey,
force.
we're going back into
under
history.
Paddy Ashdown.
That's right.
You know, but they were the third party in this country, and that's a distant memory now. And you're a Democrat ultimately. He's got that remarkable mandate, an 80-seat majority, a landslide in December 2019. That's not long ago. We've had the unprecedented circumstances of a pandemic.
Yeah, and absolutely.
But also the vaccine rollout, getting Brexit done. Britain being the fastest growing economy in the G7.
All of those things you can say, Mark, but what he has failed to deliver, he promised a cut on VAT. He could do that instantly. You know, there are many things he could have done. That red meat, if that was red meat that came out of my fridge, I'd throw it in the bin because it's stale.
I think the problem is, a lot of those promises, a lot of those Brexit promises, they're simply not compatible with being a Greta Thunberg tribute band. You can't do both. You can
do some. I'm going to be a little bit more hawkish on this because if you can use market mechanisms to do environmental stuff, we can get energy independence. That's the reason that I don't agree with the feasibility of net zero by 2050. It's an ideological commitment. But to go for energy independence, it gets us off buying batteries from China and gas from Russia. And I will end on a positive note because obviously we're both concerned about energy here. This week, and I'm going to claim a little bit of gumption for this, but the government did actually pass a bill that reformed the nuclear funding thing. So Britain's going to hopefully get new nuclear that isn't funded by China. That's a good thing. So there is some will within the remainder of the party that has some good ideas. Yeah. But the issue is, again, as we said, leadership. And
but they should keep those promises. The promises have to be kept.
They've broken so many promises and they've lied. He has lied and he is surrounded by such weak, lily-livered yes men and women who haven't got the gumption to stand up to him. And I think, you know, this weekend will have been a big test because MPs will have gone back to their constituents. They will have been absolutely bombarded with people, whether they were working in the health service, whether they saw their kids struggling at school, whether they lost their businesses, all of those things. Local elections are coming up in May. It may be that the Tory party think, OK, we'll wait to see what Sue Gray, the civil servant in charge of this report, says.
Any word on the street of what she will say?
No, because the people who are spinning it are trying to spin it to say, oh, he'll get away with it. This is the woman who caused Damien Green to resign. Yeah. She's not going to say whether any criminality. She will just produce the facts.
Yeah. I mean, I think he could survive if he wanted, if he really wanted to, if he really thought, well, I've got something.
It's what's in his heart that will define his future rather than any backbenchers.
And he doesn't care.
And the people that want him gone are so brazen about it. The people that want him gone, Labour Party that were trying to get Jeremy Corbyn elected 5 minutes ago. Yeah. The BBC. There's just so the Remainer rump. They're just so obvious. They're just so obvious and brazen in their shamelessness that You know, and it'll be decided by Tory pragmatism. It'll be decided by MPs that are saying he's become a liability. I think he could survive if he really thought, no, I must. There's the promises of Brexit have not been delivered.
And whether he wants this is anybody's guess, right? You'd have to be inside the head of Boris.
Well, I think he definitely doesn't want it. You know, I think
you think he's done, do you? Like in his own heart?
Well, I think
he had the opportunity, Tony, didn't he? When he was so ill after COVID.
Yeah.
You know, he could have come back from that and thought, blimey, I don't want to deal with this. I've got the perfect opportunity where public sympathy would have been with him, where he could say, you know, I've been really, really ill. I need to recover. I'm not fit to run the country. Well, some of us think he's not fit to run the country anyway, but not from a medical point of view. But he did have a get out. And all of this that has happened has been of his own making. Owen Paterson, the parties in Downing Street, and he's looking to blame everybody.
I mean, Patrick O'Flynn wrote a brilliant piece where he said he hasn't taken care of his friends. You know, the people that believed in him, the people that believe that we could be a low taxation,
including the likes of Lord Frost. I thought that was a devastating loss for him.
To lose that great advocate for Brexit, it just it made me despair. You know, it made me despair. It made me feel that the fight to become a sovereign, free, independent nation was ultimately meaningless because getting Brexit done was the easy bit. It's making Brexit work that counts. And he just doesn't look as though he's got the stamina in it for that marathon.
Connor, briefly, what do you think is going to happen?
I think they're pretty much morally rudderless at the moment. I'm very much of the camp that Boris should have gone quite a while ago, and that's just purely because the moment you tyrannise us once, you've lost all legitimacy. The first time you put the lockdown policy in, I don't care what anyone says about, necessary, you don't have the right to do that as a government. So he should have tendered his resignation as soon as that was over. And it's not that I'm like one of the Remainer left or one of the lefty press. I want him gone purely because I want someone to execute the promises that he ran on in the first place, but is clearly incapable of doing.
Which is a recurring theme from my panel. But what do you think, Mark, at gbnews.uk? Before the end of the show at 11, we'll be playing another great British game show. How well do you at home and my panel know our backbench MPs? But next, it turns out that the weakest link on the BBC is being described as too nice. It's not harsh anymore. So are we getting too nice, too soft as a society? We'll discuss that in our news agenda. Don't forget, after 11, big laughs and opinions. I'll be joined by two top comedians, including Andrew Doyle and Sajila Kershi, looking at tomorrow's newspaper front pages. I'll see you in 2. Don't go anywhere.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world.
If you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview Channel 236.
On Sky, we're Channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
Carol says, Mark, thank you for another great programme. GB News at its best, although I have said many times the whole of GB News has such talent, energy and courageous people, young and old. Well, look, thank you for those kind words. In particular, Carol wanted to pick up on Figan Murray, who's the mother of a young man who tragically died in the Manchester Arena bombings. I'm going to visit her website. Thank you for this opportunity to hear her story. I want to support people like her. Thank you so much, Carol. She also says, keep putting the kettle on, Mark. We love the show. Well, look, thanks, Carol. Do stay with us and tell your friends and spread the word. Still with me, Joe Phillips, Tony Parsons and Connor Tomlinson. Just a couple of minutes before our official Great British Game Show to discuss this. Welcome to the year 2022, where football fans get cautioned for using discriminatory language for mocking a player's height. That's right, Manchester United sent an email warning some of their fans after Wolves player João Moutinho was taunted for being short. Roy Keane would have obviously thought that was civilised back in his playing days. How times have changed. And crossing into the TV world, former Watchdog presenter Alice Beer has said that the Weakest Link relaunch is badly missing Anne Robinson and her insults. The show is currently being headed by comic Romesh Ranganathan. I've got to say, I think he's a brilliant comedian, but Beer says he's just too nice. He's too polite. She told the Mail on Sunday, you can't say anything anymore. You have to put nice people on TV all the time. So what do we think about this, Joe? Do you think that telly's gone a bit too nice?
Are we nice?
Well,
we're being very nice.
You're nice, but you've got what I would describe when I was working the comedy circuit. Is you've got a knife in the sock.
Well, we're being very, collegiate. We're having a good discussion.
I'm not doing my job then.
Well, you don't have to be rude and offensive in order to make good television. I mean, I sort of think, this thing about, it's a bit of banter, which I presume is what the football club are claiming.
Yeah.
Is the thin end of a very unpleasant wedge, and it is particularly offensive when it's a bit of banter is about race, gender, sexuality.
Well, yeah, but race, gender, sexuality, absolutely, but height? I mean, I used to get called a lanky git when I was on stage.
Yeah, and
probably
you are.
Because I am.
And you are, Mark.
See, that was harsh.
No, I know.
You get cancelled on the beeb for that.
But this is the point, though, when you start saying what is and isn't offensive, what you can and can't say, you can't stop what is offensive at an arbitrary number of categories. Because race, gender and sexuality are all immutable, right? You can't change those. Also is height. So and people get discriminated on height, particularly on dating apps, for example. Not that that's ever been a problem for me. So how can you say, you might think it's ridiculous, but you've got no objective moral principle that stops people taking objection to that. So why just cry about jokes? Just write them all off.
I mean, I would have thought you there was some sort of choice barbs when you were growing up as a boy.
Yeah, it's interesting, the way football presents itself as this paragon of moral virtue, because it's still a working class game, and if you're there with football fans, it's not quite as woke and squeaky clean as it was. So sending emails to the fan base, I think is slightly absurd. But I can remember, I can remember the racism in the 70s and 80s. I can remember how absolutely toxic and accepted it was. So I'm happy that it's not like that anymore. I'm happy that you're going to get nicked if you start screaming about someone's girl, because it's completely changed. It's totally changed. So I don't think you can ever be too nice, really. I think we like a pantomime villain in this country. We like Anne Robinson. I don't see much sign that Anne's being cancelled. Her career seems to be, rocking into her 80s or whatever.
I used to have a West Ham season ticket for donkey's years, and used to go to football all the time. And some of the things that are, and you'll know this, Tony, some of the things that might be seen as insulting are actually quite funny. Some of the songs and things like that can be quite witty and amusing, and you know this as a comic.
Yeah.
But it's how you use the power that you have in your voice, whether it's to sing or chant or say something. And really, we shouldn't have to keep reminding people to think about how it is.
What about the Weakest Link, when Anne Robinson used to say, "You're a right thicko, aren't you? Did you even go to school?" I mean, that was just funny, wasn't it? I mean, we've seen Lord Sugar do it in the boardroom.
But that was what she was employed for.
But maybe you missed that.
No, because it's not my sort of programme. But it's a sort of, have we moved on?
But
maybe it's not funny
we still
anymore.
Get that, don't we? Craig Revel Howard is the pantomime dame. He's the one who gets booed for saying pretty much the same stuff as everybody else. But so.
Well, yeah, look, I've got to say, it's been a really interesting conversation, and lots of you picking up on my panel's discussion about Boris. Lots of people supportive of Boris. I'm watching a programme tonight, says Stephen. I just wanted to make the point that I believe we the people are crying out for moral leadership in this country. And also David. David says Boris mustn't expect to get on with everyone, but he must get on with the British people. Jackie, all this Boris bashing, keep blaming Boris for parties when he wasn't even there or there for 25 minutes. Keir Starmer and his cronies broke lockdown rules. No one's calling for him to resign from the Labour Party. All right, well, look, that one will run and run, but I do want to put it on a matter of national broadcast record that many of you still back Boris, and it will be interesting to look at those polls, of course, as Joe mentioned, in May, the local elections. Lots more to come before 11 o'clock. Earlier this week, Jacob Rees-Mogg was cutting when he called the leader of the Scottish Conservatives, Douglas Ross, a lightweight figure. And here he is when asked for his thoughts on the Welsh Tory leader.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Following his disparaging remarks about the leader of the Scottish Conservatives, can we have a statement from him about exactly what he meant by that? For example, does he think the leader of the Welsh Conservatives is a lightweight figure? And can he name him? Leader!
My honourable. Hashtag awkward. Well, of course, the leader of the Welsh Conservatives is Andrew R.T. Davies. There he is, fine figure of a man. Well, inspired by Rees-Mogg's forgetfulness, tonight we want you to separate the political lightweights from the heavyweights. It's time for this. Yes, it's time to play the Great British Game Show. Tonight's game is called Who's That Member? Please, don't be so obscene. It's a family show. I'm going to show you at home and my panel here in the studio. And if you're listening on the radio, I'll describe the photographs of the people we're going to have a look at. They are a member of Parliament somewhere in the UK, some well-known, others more obscure. So tell me, who's the member? Let's start with our first politician. And that's a lady with fair hair. She's in the House of Commons.
That's easy.
Who could that be? Joe?
Yvette Cooper.
It is Yvette Cooper.
Shadow Home Secretary.
Shadow Home Secretary. There you go. You know your onions. Look at that. How about MP number 2? Who could this be?
I can't see.
Somebody hoping to be re-elected at the next election. He came in 2019.
2019 intake.
He is a Red Wall superstar.
Brent Smith.
Well done. I'll give you the points. Brendan Clark Smith. Next up, how about this? The Labour politician. His interests outside politics include hill walking, military history and rugby league. Who could it be? I'm not even sure his mother knows quite who he is. It's Derek Twigg, Labour backbencher. Twiggy, the Twigmeister T-Dog. How about this one, number 4?
Oh, I know who that is.
Labour MP,
Rosie
opposition
Duff.
whip.
Is that Esther McVeigh in the 70s?
It's
Criticised for
Rosie
writing in a tweet that only
Rosie
women have a
Duffield.
cervix. Yes, well done, Rosie Duffield.
Rosie
Joe
Duffield.
smashing this. Joe's owning this at the
well, you
moment.
should know.
OK,
Well,
how about our next one? Politician number 5.
Louis French, he's my MP.
There you go, he's your Connor's MP. Marvellous stuff. And I'm glad you got Rosie, Joe, because she's your MP.
She is indeed.
OK, actually, can we just jump to number 8? Is that possible, Connor, or not?
No, not.
Yes, there we go.
My MP, Tulip.
It's Tulip Sadiq. It is Tony's MP. And let's finish by this one. Who's this final politician, number 9? Close ally of Keir Starmer, a former dentist and the leader of Scottish Labour.
Oh, that's the lightweight.
Oh.
Harsh but fair. It's Anas Sarwar. That's right, Anas Sarwar. So brilliant stuff. Well, can I tell you, we have a winner, and it is Tony Parsons. But my thanks to Tony, Connor and Joe for a brilliant panel tonight. I'm sticking around for big laughs and big opinions in Headliners. See you in 12.
Looking ahead to tomorrow's weather, and the UK is looking like a dry, bright and cold start for many, with a widespread frost. Let's home in on the detail. The southwest of England will start dry and sunny with light winds on Monday, but it'll also be a cold start with frost for many, especially in the east. Low cloud, mist and fog at first in the southeast, but brighter further north and in the west. Monday morning starting cold and frosty across Wales as well. Light winds and plenty of crisp winter sunshine on offer. And the northwest also starting the day dry, but there will be low cloud and hill fog over some of the higher ground, especially around Greater Manchester, and a very chilly start as well. Cloud creeping in over parts of the Pennines in the northeast, while it will be brighter towards the coast. A cold start, very dry and also frosty. Scotland starting